Hey, welcome to the Contractor Commute. My name is Drew, and today we've got a guest. We have Jeremiah Lee with us today. Jeremiah, how are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Jeremiah, your family owns and operates a company called Rock Solid Renovations here in Springfield in the Ozarks.
Yeah.
So tell us about your company, what you guys do, and kind of your journey of how you got into it.
Okay. So we're primarily a design build remodeler. So we're doing probably what most people would consider like a little bit higher end kitchens, bathrooms, room additions, and projects that are design focused. The company was started in '94 by my dad, and he's been doing this kind of my whole life, but officially Rock Solid Renovations started in 1994. And he ran that basically one-man operation. So he was the everything,
Yep.
Estimator, the carpenter, the human resources, the whole thing.
Yeah.
So in 2002, I had gone to college for about 3 semesters and was kind of flailing. Wasn't doing very good. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. But that's what everybody did. So I went, and after that third semester of not so great grades, my mom said, "You pay for the next semester. If you get A's and B's, I'll write you a check back." So I immediately called my dad and asked for a job. And kind of the rest is history.
Yeah.
I had no idea that this was my career path. I was literally just like, I need a full-time job, and my dad has a construction company. I can go sweep the floors or, carry a board from here to there or whatever it is. Didn't really have a lot of skills other than just growing up with the family and the business. And at this point now, after 20 years of doing this, I've pretty much done everything from sweep the floors to write contracts and do the estimating and sales and design and everything in between.
Yeah.
So.
That's awesome. I think because we talk about longevity, one of the things we talk about is the majority of people who get started in this space in residential construction, I think 4 out of 5 go out of business in the first 5 years. Mm-hmm. So to have a business that's been intact and running and successful, I'm not good at math on the fly, but was that 30 years?
Yeah, it's approaching that.
Approaching 30 years in business, and not just in any business, but you've grown a team. If you hop on your website and look at the work you guys do, it's pretty stunning. I mean, you guys do some pretty awesome work that a lot of people would like to be able to get to. So. On the fly, brag on your company a little bit. I know you guys have won some awards. Maybe what are some of the jobs or milestones you guys have accomplished that maybe you're the most proud of?
So, wow, we've won quite a few. There's a local publication that does kind of design awards once a year for remodel projects, multiple categories and that kind of thing. And we've won at least one of those every year since its inception. So that's probably one thing that we're really proud of because of putting the right people in place and building some processes. We've been able to kind of achieve that, which I don't think would have been possible before that.
Yeah, I think you mentioned 2 things, people and processes. We'll probably jump into 2 of those things because I think those are probably undervalued elements of building a business. But if you look at you do you guys do. You mentioned that if you do higher end work, most of your clients are spending a good amount to have you guys come in. You guys have designers in-house. You charge a design fee. So just to get your company in the door costs more than what the average remodeler is doing in the area. Can you talk through maybe that process or maybe some mindset shifts that have had to happen? Because it wasn't always that way. Right. I mean, you guys at a certain point, you didn't just come out of the gate, charging that much or getting that kind of work. You had to earn reputation and that sort of thing. What are some things maybe that you've learned along the way of transitioning from just time and materials and basic billing into maybe more advanced work, design in-house, that sort of thing? What are some things you've learned along the way?
So I think number one, we've kind of touched on this before whenever we've had some discussions, but it's scary, to kind of take that leap and say, hey, we're going to charge for our design service or our design / estimate, to provide you with a cost for a job. But in the end of the day, you are paying for that because we're doing the due diligence. We have time and energy that's involved in doing that, which allows us to provide you with a more accurate estimate up front, and then we don't have those issues down the road. One thing that I noticed before we had that process in place was there wasn't a clear-cut scope of work and cost for the project. Mm-hmm. And believe it or not, those are pretty important things whenever you're doing work for somebody. Yeah. You're in their home and you're tearing up their bathroom or their kitchen or whatever. You don't want to get to a point where, let's say, there's a discrepancy of $5,000 on this kitchen job, and who's going to pay for that? Well, if you're a one-man show and you're working by the hour, you're not paying $5,000 out of your pocket. You can, run into have issues with clients because of that. That was probably not that we ever had major problems in that respect, but there were discussions, I'll say, with customers where it's like, well, why is this more? Well, because we didn't take the time up front to really figure out what it would take to produce this thing that we were talking about. Yeah.
I'm guess everybody listening has run into that, whether it was 500 or 5,000, right. The gap where halfway through you realize you missed something. Mm-hmm. And you're either going to eat it or you're going to pass that cost along to the customer.
Sure.
And we've talked to plenty of guys who say, you know what, I just shake their hand and I eat it.
Yep. And we've done that a lot too, that I didn't finish with a bachelor's degree, obviously, like I previously said, but I have a degree in this, that's been very expensive because of those situations.
Yeah. So let's get into that. So like your qualification process so someone calls your office and says, hey, and this might sound like a really basic question, but someone calls in and says, hey, I want you guys to remodel, rebuild my kitchen. What does that process look like at where you're at today?
So first things first, we want to make sure that we're a good fit for each other. So this isn't just about, them calling and because they called us that's a good fit for us and that's a good customer for us based on our model. So we like to do qualifications. So we like to ask what their time frame is for completing the work. If they have a wedding coming up and that they're going to host at their house, when is that? Are we able to get to the work and get it completed in that time frame? What is their budget for the project? Mm-hmm. Which another hard thing to get used to talking to people about up front. But I found that just opening the door and having the discussion and being very honest with people about the true costs of things really helps educate them to understand, all the things that we are kind of covering with that, with those costs. And then qualification, I guess, would be, the time frame, budget would be important. And then, are they looking for a design build contractor? Do they want somebody who's going to provide those design services as part of, the total package that we provide?
And I think, we talk about having the design services. We've talked to a lot of guys who they put out a lot of estimates, but they're not designers. They're builders. That's what they do. And so a lot of times their proposal stalls out because the customer doesn't know how to bridge the gap between what they see on Pinterest and actually picking out those like finishes and the design work. And so the builder's like, I don't know, what kind of tile do you want? That's your job, customer. And then the job kind of stalls out because they're not really bridging that gap. You guys have brought your design process in-house where it's your designers who are designing it. Maybe that obviously is going to bring your costs up and the price up for the customer, but maybe what are some of the benefits of someone who's maybe thought about doing that, but maybe hasn't pulled the trigger because of the increased overhead?
Sure. So when we started, I guess ahead of this, my dad and myself were both estimating, doing sales, and also designing these projects. And anybody who's kind of worn those hats understands it's really complicated and hard to do, and definitely hard to do a good job at where you feel confident in the help that you're providing the client. And so we really thought that if we could bring somebody in that was trained professionally to do this design work, that we could really streamline our process as far as going from an initial estimate or budget range that we might provide somebody to actually having a fixed cost for a job. So that designer then would, pick every piece of the project out. So from, the grout for the tile to the cabinet hardware, paint colors, all of that. But it also allowed us to charge for that service because we were providing something of value to our customer. And so there really we didn't look at it as a profit center, as a way that we would actually make some profit on. We were just trying to cover the expense of bringing that person on, and looking at the upside as the benefit to us of streamlining that process and getting more clarification on what the scope of work is and what those materials are, and again, getting just clarification, I guess, primarily.
It probably improves the efficiency of the process as well. Because once someone signs on, yes, I'm doing this, your designers go to work immediately.
Right.
And they sit in your office, they speak your language, they know your timelines. And so when you actually go out to build it, there's probably a lot of clarity, on what are we building.
Sure.
Because I think that's the other horror story we run into a lot is the guy who is the builder and then just puts on the designer hat out of necessity, that it does get complicated and then it is changing. Maybe they don't know the right questions to ask on the design side up front. And so then you have all of the, everyone's got change orders. I'm assuming that even with this process,
sure,
there's a lot of change orders, but you probably minimize quite a few of them because there's clarity up front in what we're doing.
We definitely minimize those. Now they're generally things that people are opting to do additional, growing the scope of work more or less, rather than, hey, we didn't, cover this thing, or we didn't really solidify what that was going to look like. So now there's an additional cost involved with producing that.
Talk to me. So you're going to have customers who look at that design fee, or they're going to say, really, you want to charge me just to come do an estimate? Like this other company is just, I already had 2 companies come out and gave me estimates. They didn't charge me. How do you answer that question?
So we started really looking at other professionals, other industries outside of construction, and saying, okay, well, if you go to speak with your CPA, is there a fee involved? Do you go speak with your attorney? Is there a fee involved, or your doctor? And the list goes on. But we really had to have like a mindset change that allowed us to view ourselves as experienced professionals, just like a lot of other people in other industries. And so when we are going to do an estimate or spend the time to drive to somebody's house, spend an hour or 2 with them, walking the project, talking it, we want to make sure that we are able to spend that time and put that energy towards doing that work. Yeah.
And I think that's you talk about mindset shift, because I think a lot of guys do give away that time for free. And there is this fear of, well, I'll miss jobs. And you mentioned the word scary earlier. Like, what are maybe some things you did to like just get over that fear and be confident charging, knowing that you're not going to be the cheapest bid, because you're not.
Right.
What are some mindsets you've gotten into or had to overcome just to be able, hey, I'm going to put out the highest price and I know that, and be okay with it?
We like to, I'll back up a little bit. So part of that, doing the design work and having all of that information up front, may seem like a project costs more by having us do it on the front end. But a lot of times when you have the lack of due diligence and somebody's just winging it and they're throwing a number out there or saying, yeah, sure, I think I can do it for $20,000, but I'm just going to charge you for this much an hour and whatever the materials are. And at the end of the day, a lot of times you're in the same position at the end. You've spent just the same amount of money. It just seemed better, more optimistic, I guess, on the front end. And everybody likes, to be told what they want to hear. So if they think that a project should be X and somebody says, yeah, I think we can do that, then a lot of times they'll kind of go with that person, not realizing that it's not really locked in. And there are a lot of variables that can come up through the course of the project or even prior to starting a project with the design.
I think so. That puts you in a pricing model. You guys would be fixed price then for most of these work.
Correct.
Jobs.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're going to come up front and give them a proposal of here's the fixed price of what it's going to cost.
Right.
No ballparks, no if the time goes over or, and you also have from the design side, it pre-dialed in. So there's probably not ton of allowances at the time that the contract
No.
is signed.
Our goal is 0 allowances at the contract. So
That's a big deal.
the only thing that we really will let slide on occasion, we don't even like to do this, is like paint colors, because they come up later on in a project. So sometimes a client wants to see the tile and the grout up and installed and then look at paint samples, next to that stuff in that space versus picking one, at our office in our showroom. But yeah, our goal is 0 to be determined, 0 allowances, and really hash every detail out of the project.
That takes a lot more work up front, for sure.
It can be frustrating at first because it's not as quick, and the clients don't always understand, that, hey, I've been in the office for 2 weeks and maybe you haven't heard from me, but that doesn't mean that we're not doing something to move your project ahead.
Yeah, because I think a lot of times they are getting quicker responses, and it's a fuzzier number with less detail. Whereas what you guys are putting out is a fixed price where you've really gone through every detail. That from a sales process, talk to me about what that proposal. Well, let me ask this question: what percentage of proposals do you put out there after they've done the design work? What's the close rate?
It's pretty big. So I haven't done the math in a little while, probably the last 6 months or so, but we used to keep pretty tight reins on that. And it's over 8 out of 10. So, I mean, it's a huge close rate. They're somewhat invested with you, they've paid for a design retainer, you're working with them. And so it's less likely in most scenarios that they're going to go out and try to get 3 or 4 bids for this project at the end of the day. It allows you to build some rapport with the customer. So it's not like in 2 days I provided an estimate and we're expected to be good friends. It's a 2-month process, and we've met multiple times, and we do have a good rapport, and we have trust in each other that we understand what we're doing and that the cost is fair and all of those things.
Yeah, I think if you look at, having a close rate of 80+% by the time you're getting a proposal out, that does take more work up front, doing the design work, getting the details lined out, understanding exactly what you're building, and then putting out a fixed price proposal, which is probably going up against some cost plus bids or time and materials bids. From a customer standpoint, what do you think customers see in your proposals that maybe causes you to win the job, even though it's going to be more expensive?
So we provide kind of on, I guess, to back up a little bit, back to the processes that we mentioned earlier. My initial visit is free of charge. We do not charge for the initial consultation. So, but we're qualifying those people over the phone so that I'm not just driving all over town, wasting my time, wasting their time if it's not something where we're going to be a good fit for each other. And after that, I put together a proposal that is just kind of a very loose number that says, here's kind of sort of the range that I think a project like we discussed in our meeting would cost. And then from there, that proposal kind of lists out that we provide every piece of material and the placement of that material. So it's the labor to install it, the thin set for the tile itself, the grout, all of those things that it takes to install tile. We provide 100% of it, which I think a lot of people like, because sometimes somebody says, well, you go pick it out and you buy it and then I'll put it in, and they don't know what they're doing. This isn't, they need somebody to help them, and that's why they've called whoever it is in the first place. So I do think that helps. I think that knowing exactly what the project entails, what the design looks like, what all the pieces and parts are, by going through the design process is a huge benefit to our clients too.
Well, I think at that point that you've earned trust,
Yes.
so they're like, okay, this is probably a higher price tag, but over that process of talking to you, understanding the qualification, understanding the pain you're going to alleviate by providing all of I'm not going to send you to the supply house to go figure it out yourself on your own time and figure it out later. We're going to design this for you. Is a big deal. If I look at, I know everyone puts their highlights up on their website, their Instagram feeds or whatever, but if I look at what Rock Solid's doing, it's some high end work, and so you're dealing with people with larger budgets normally, which is probably puts you in some fun jobs from the creative space. What are some maybe misconceptions for the guy who's building their craft, they're getting better, they're going to get some mid-range jobs, but they really want to step up and really start to get a higher end work. Maybe what are some misconceptions people have about that market, you know?
So just like with anything, if the price tag is bigger, the expectations are a lot higher. So people do expect a higher level of service, you know, and I guess sometimes what looks like a big price tag, you know, and seems like you can just go into the supply house and carte blanche, pick whatever you want out, is rarely the case. Like the scope's bigger, there's more square footage, whatever that may be on these higher dollar projects. So I would say that's one thing, that the expectations are higher, which isn't always a bad thing, because that sometimes makes you move your bar up and elevate, you know, your processes and things to match. But people, you know, if there's more money on the table, then they expect more bang for their buck, I guess, at the end of the day.
And I think too, you kind of alluded to it, but you can still make big mistakes.
Oh, sure.
And frankly, maybe even bigger.
Absolutely.
Because your margins are,
I mean, you can absolutely make bigger mistakes on bigger projects. There's definitely scenarios where you've just traded money at the end of the day and you didn't really come out with anything, and you maybe did a job that was six figures, you know, which is huge. It's a big project and a lot of money, but really doesn't do you any good if you can't profit at least a little bit off of that.
Yeah. What's the we talked, this kind of might be backtracking a little bit, but we talked about estimates and the importance of getting that right. What are things that are probably pitfalls or areas that guys normally miss when doing an estimate? 'Cause I'm assuming you've probably got some horror stories of mistakes you've made.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, I would be lying if I told you that I don't still make mistakes, you know. Obviously fewer and further between, smaller, hopefully, is always, you know, the hope. But I really think it's hard whenever you're trying to wear multiple hats, and especially if you're wearing a tool belt, to really sit down and take the time, because, you know, you just feel like you're pressured to, you know, be on the job, and then, I'm going to work doing this estimate all night, and you hurry up and do it. But I would really say that spending the time really diving deep into what the details are and spending a little extra time there is well worth it. You know, try to give yourself time. Tell your client it's going to be a week or so, 10 days even, before they hear back from you with that estimate, because of the amount of time that it takes to really get involved in it and figure out what it's going to take to produce that.
Yeah. What's the oh man, I forgot it. There's something you said that rang my bell. That's what it is. So what your business now, like, I mean, for where your business is coming in from, like, how far are you guys booked out right now?
So we consistently run 6 to 8 months out on work. So if you call me today, it's going to be 6 or 8 months before we could actually show up on site to do physical work there.
Got it. And where is your business coming from? How much are you spending on marketing? How much is word of mouth?
We have a pretty small, in perspective, marketing budget is what we're spending. We do some print ads in a publication that has like our perfect demographic, you know, on paper, but still primarily word of mouth is our number one contributor. So
how would you describe the importance then of word of mouth and your reputation?
It's huge. You have to remember that doing this, you're kind of a roommate with this person for some period of time, right? So the quicker you can build rapport and establish a relationship with them and have those conversations about the fact that you're going to be in this person's house all day, every day for sometimes months, you know, definitely several weeks at any rate, but in most cases, you know, 3 to 6 months that you're dealing with this person every day. And so that really helps, I think, establish what's necessary for them to go on and say, you know, this person's a really good person. They provide good work. They took the time to explain what we were getting and go through that design process and really nail everything.
So I think once you get, you know, what we found too is whatever business you're in, your ideal customer normally hangs out with other ideal customers.
Yes.
And once you get reputation with one, they're normally hanging out and talking on Friday nights with the type of people that you want to be doing work for.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you guys have also built a business, right? So a lot of people, when they're in the owner operator and they're in the first, you know, few years of getting started, it's just their name. Like it's, oh, Jeremiah Lee's the guy. I think one thing you guys have done in the community that we know is like Rock Solid Renovation is the brand, is the business. And that has a strong reputation, not just your name.
Right.
How would you describe the importance of building that brand more so than just Jeremiah is the person?
So I wish I could say that was like a concept or an idea that we kind of set out to achieve, but it really wasn't. And we've just grown the business, and maybe partially coming into this, you know, my dad started this and had operated it for 10 or 12 years before I was involved. And it probably was more his name at that point. And I remember for the first few years, whenever I came in, it was kind of frustrating because people wouldn't return my calls. People didn't recognize who you were or whatever. And you're like, I have to always tell them, oh, I'm so, you know, I'm so-and-so, so-and-so's my dad, you know? And it's like, well, yeah, it's frustrating. Or I got to call my dad to have somebody call me back, you know, to get a return phone call and things like that. So I think it's evolved. I think part of the branding probably has been building our processes and setting ourselves apart from other people that do similar work.
Yeah, I think you create consistency with the brand. People know, hey, that's who that is. And, you know, the goal is no matter if they call in, no matter who they talk to, they understand they're talking to a company and a business that has the reputation, not just the person.
Correct.
Because that old thing you're talking about, like, hey, if no one's willing to talk to you, they're only willing to talk to your dad. A lot of people would be in that space where it's like, well, I can hire people, but it doesn't matter. I'm still doing all the work.
Exactly.
You know, how would you say you built a team? What are things you look for in a good team member?
So we have a small office and small by numbers and by square footage. And so it's important that you get along with whoever it is that you work with. And so we like to find people that are like-minded, you know, and do have passion for what it is that we're doing, because we're passionate about doing this and helping people and creating these kind of design-driven projects. That's what makes it fun to me, and that's what adds the complexity and the problem solving that we really enjoy to do. And so all of those things, I guess, you know, that's what I mean when I say like-minded. It's people that enjoy the process of saying, that's really cool. How do we do that? How do we make that come to fruition? You know? Yeah.
I think it's got to light a spark in them a little bit, you know, because if it's just a job, right, then it's like just a contract. If you show up, we pay you, you know, and there's no heart in the work.
Right.
You know, I guess when it was internal fire lights over creating.
100%. One of the most satisfying things is to like go to a project when it's done and maybe go back on your phone and look at what the pictures, the before pictures look like, and be like, man, we did that, you know, look at it. It's extremely satisfying.
Yeah. I think, you know, you guys, what percentage of, or how do you guys approach what you want to do in-house and you actually want to build yourself versus what you want to sub out? What are maybe someone who's also growing in their business and saying, hey, I got to get to the point where I starting to go into the GC hat where I'm actually subbing out some work that I used to always do myself. What are some things you would look for in what you're willing to sub out and what you're looking for in a good sub?
So we do business almost exclusively based on relationship. Not to say that cost doesn't matter, but I would rather be able to call you every time and know what you're going to provide as far as an estimate, and that when I schedule you to do work, you're going to show up when you say. So it's basically, I'm looking for another professional business owner, because I don't have a lot of time to run somebody else's business or do their scheduling or make follow-up calls and things like that. So that's probably priority one whenever it comes to who we do work with. As far as what we decide to do, I think it's a matter of strengths and weaknesses, and somewhat out of necessity too. There's certain things that are going to be harder to call a subcontractor for. Like there's not at least in this area, there's not a demo subcontractor. So if something has to be removed or torn out and put in a dumpster, there's not a company that you can call that specifically does that type of work. So things like that were natural to bring in-house. Things like electrical and plumbing didn't make as much sense because in order to pull permits for projects, you have to have a master licensed electrician or plumber. We don't have 40 hours worth of plumbing and electrical work to be done. We have quite a bit, but we don't have anywhere near that much. So those things make sense to sub out. We do a lot of our own framing. Most of our framing is interior framing. We're not doing new builds, so it's all renovation work. So most of it's interior work. Trim, accessory installs. So most of our work is probably in the realm of carpentry in some way, shape, or form. And then the other things we kind of find the right person and put them in place.
Yeah. You've probably had guys come in that were maybe entry-level carpenters or builders that grew skill over time. And at a certain point want to say, hey, I want to go out on my own and start my own business.
Sure.
And I think that's pretty common.
Absolutely.
What advice would you give that person? If someone's in that boat right now and they're thinking, I want to go out on my own and go from just a tradesman to like actually owning my own business. What advice do you give them?
Number one, I would talk to people that have their own business, because I think just like you alluded to earlier with the Instagram story and things looking different from the outside than maybe the inside, you really want to take everything into consideration, because there's a lot to owning your own business, and not everybody needs to own their own business. Some people can make as much or more money working for somebody else and not having, maybe some of the headaches that you would have in owning your own business. So that's probably the number one thing that I would recommend, is to really get in touch with maybe more than one person that has their own business, small business, and find out kind of what some of the struggles were and some of the more specifics about running your own business.
So if I'm that guy and someone gave me that advice and I call you, I'm like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What are the things I'm not thinking about?
The amount of work that's involved in doing everything. Anytime, even a small company, if there's 2 or 3 people, you're sharing the load of whatever that, cumulative work is. And so I think it's really critical that they understand that there's a lot of work to be done, and it's amplified whenever it's just one person performing all that work.
Give me some examples of something they probably are not thinking about.
So most people are thinking, I'm going to make, let's just hypothetically say $50 an hour. I'm going to go out and I'm going to do this work, and I'm going to work 40 hours a week. You're not going to be able to bill for 40 hours a week. So you're not really making what you think or what you're projecting that you're going to make, because you have to spend time to drive across town and look at these jobs, meet with people, figure out what it is you're doing, put together estimates, all of which you're not going to get paid for, but you're going to have to allot time to. So if you're trying to have some balance between work and family life or home life, whatever that might be, you're not going to be able to bill out for 40 hours a week. So you need to adjust your projections accordingly.
Yeah, I think that's the thing too, is like, hey, they look at, hey, what I'm getting paid hourly, then I know what my company is charging for me hourly. And it's like, wait a minute, I'm getting hosed here.
Yeah.
But they're probably not thinking about the overhead, the cost, the insurance,
exactly,
all the other things that go into actually running a business. It's a great point. We run into that a lot too. Actually, people are like, hey, I thought I'd be making more money, and they're working their tails off, working way more than 40 hours a week. But at the end of the month, they're not sure if they're actually making any money or not.
Sure. We also have to bill. You have to bill. I mean, there's just, the list goes on. There's a lot of things that's hard to account for, that have to be done in order to run a business. So, but those expenses are a big part of it.
Yeah. And it's not for everybody.
That's the other thing. Yeah. It's definitely not for everybody. And that's kind of what I meant by, I think sometimes people, are better off to maybe make what seems like less per hour, but also not have all of that extra responsibility to have to deal with.
Yeah. I think it is really like, do you want to have a trade, or if you're wanting to build a business, you got to think long-term. Think about your dad, he was owner operator. Well, if he had never made this shift into actually building a business and thinking about, okay, I need to bring design in-house, I need to start building a team, all of that. If he never did those things, we talked to a lot of guys who are also just like I'm getting older. I just had a birthday and I'm like, man, I just can't like stuff hurts for no reason.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I can't physically do what I used to be able to do 15 years ago.
All right.
And I think if you're a guy who, maybe is thinking about taking that leap or going and building a business, thinking through that long term, what do I want to be doing 15, 20 years from now? And I think about guys like your dad. He may not have realized at the time, but he made some really good decisions to put himself in a place where he's at now.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I had a relatively big birthday here this last fall too. And you just wake up and hurt the next day. Yeah. It's kind of interesting how that works. Yeah. You're like, that was weird. I didn't know that was there.
Yeah. But I think we've talked to guys in here too, where it's like, hey, like they're just like, well, I'm not sure what I'm going to do because they've been the time and materials guy for 15 years. They've never run it. They've always been busy. They're not sure how much money they're making, but they're making enough to cover their bills, but they're physically slowing down. And that's when a mindset shift starts to have to happen where it's like, okay, I got to actually build a business of something that can make money when I'm not out swinging the hammer, or behind the wheel of the truck, One last question we'll get into is, so it's a family business working with working within your family. Give me some tips. That's probably also pretty common in this space. What are some things you've learned about how to effectively work with your family without wanting to fight at Thanksgiving dinner? Or do you still fight at Thanksgiving dinner?
Fight's probably a strong word. You have disagreements
tension.
From time to time.
Yeah. Everyone has
a little, a little tension.
I think every family has it, whether you work together or not.
Exactly, you do. It just does add a little bit different element to the relationship. I'm really fortunate. We've been very fortunate. Not to say that we haven't had disagreements, because we have, but by and large, we get along really well, and it works really well. And I think probably the number one reason that is that we're all on the same page about where we're going and what our goals are and our vision for the company.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for taking time again, just talking through your business and kind of your road to get where you've got, your pricing models, processes, all those things, super valuable. So thanks for taking time.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thanks for having me.
That's a wrap for this episode of the Contractor Commute. We'll see you guys next time.